final thing I want to talk about today is about how we can find meaning in the individual choices that we make on a day-to-day basis and in the actions that we take on a day-to-day basis. So I think the book on this topic is Man's Search for Meaning by Vitor Frankl. And so Man's Search for Meaning is a book of two halves. The first half of the book is about the author's experiences in a concentration camp in, I think it's in Poland during World War II. I think it's Auschwitz or Dachau. And so the author Frankl he was a Jewish psychologist, and he was interned in this concentration camp. He lost his wife and both his parents. And so the first half of the book is very grim, very heavy reading. But it's worth it for the insights in the second half of the book, where Frankl talks about, I suppose, finding meaning in life, finding meaning more generally. One of the main lessons in the book, for me anyway, is that we can find meaning in the moral choices that we make. So there's a quote in the book called, and it goes like this: "It's life is questioning you daily, hourly. How do you respond?" And what Frankl is talking about there is that, I suppose, often life poses us kind of moral questions. And I think his experiences in the concentration camp kind of made that very, very obvious to him, made it very, very clear. So, for example, some of the moral questions he would be asked would be very serious on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, did he share his last piece of bread with his also starving fellow inmate? Or did he not inform on a fellow inmate, even though, he himself and everyone he knew would be punished if he didn't inform? Or I suppose more generally, did he just give up or because it was such a horrible situation, or did he actually try to help others? And I suppose in response to these kind of moral questions, we often think, these are tough and that we should, go into deep thought or maybe meditation or maybe look at the old philosophers in terms of trying to figure out what the right response is. And for Frankl, he thought this was the wrong method. This is the wrong way to go about it. That he thought, most of the time we actually know what the right thing is to do in any given situation, that if we look inside ourselves a little bit. And the correct response to these kind of horrible moral questions is to take the right action and take the right conduct, is to do the right thing. And a point that Frankl makes in the book is that we always have a choice in these situations, because he gives the example of the one thing the Nazis couldn't take away from him, even though they could take away his life, is they couldn't take away how he chose to respond to what they did to him. So, for example, he could always choose to share his last piece of bread, or he could always choose to not inform on a fellow inmate, or he could always choose to try and help others rather than give up and die. And I think that this is important in terms of how we can find meaning, because it shows that we can find meaning in how we respond to each individual situation, that we don't have to have a big overarching purpose that's, save the planet or save the Amazon forest, or all great things to have, but I suppose we don't necessarily have to have a big overarching purpose in order to find meaning. I think the COVID situation is a very good example of this and how we can find meaning in those individual moral choices that we make. I'd seen a lot of people chose to socially distance. A lot of people choose to wear a mask out now or on public transport or going into shops because they don't want to infect other people. A lot of people chose to spend 10, 15 minutes even with a socially isolated neighbor or to go shopping for other people. And doing the right thing, making the right moral choices in these, individual instances can be very, very, very meaningful, And I think if there was one positive out of the whole COVID situation is it did present a lot of situations where people did take the right, meaningful choices.